Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY sailboat refit video. This week I'm going to continue working in the forward cabin. If you're new to my channel, this somewhat messy looking boat is Athena. I'm about 4 years into a somewhat extensive refit, the end goal being for my fiance Ava and I to be able to move aboard in roughly 6 months and start cruising full time. But let's continue into the forward cabin. The plan for this week is to finish the washer dryer area that's in here. I also want to put up the supports for the wooden slats here in the v-berth, and that's going to be basically the same process I used aboard Obelix, the boat I'm living aboard, about 5 years ago. Just feast your eyes on that magnificent beard. Way back then, insulating the v-berth and putting up the wooden slats turned out to be a 9-part series. I promise you the pace is going to be quite a bit quicker this time around, but the end result will be just as spiffy. The reason I want to get started on the v-berth now is because the weather is supposed to be warm enough for me to epoxy stuff to the inside of the hull for a few days this week, so I want to take advantage of that. I'd also like to finish the clothing locker area here, which basically just involves putting up 3 shelves in there in the long-term storage area. Last but certainly not least, I want to get this Garmin chart plotter fired up so that this video doesn't just become woodworking, and we might even also be able to get the radar and the camera at the very top of the mast connected. That would be very cool. But let's start with the v-berth. As you might be able to see, that foam-backed vinyl is kind of drooping and looking a little bit sad. So I want to rip that out and put in some nice wooden mahogany slats. So first step is to get rid of the vinyl. I'll be very surprised if there isn't a bit of mold waiting for me in here. Yep, I'd say that is about a 10 on the nastiness scale. At least the hull looks to be in perfect shape, but feast your eyes on all of the mold on the underside of this. Ugh. That's the bulk of the cleanup taken care of on the port side. There is still the starboard side to deal with. After everybody's favorite, a little bit of oh glorious sanding of itchy fiberglass, I've basically got some surfaces that's ready to move on to the next step. I got really lucky with the foam here aboard Athena. It's like it's hardly even adhered to the hull. You guys saw how it came off in big chunks. That's not always the case. Aboard Obelix, I had to fight for every square centimeter. The mahogany slats look like this. They're gonna get varnished and they're gonna look like $1,000,000. Now to secure them to the hull, I'm gonna be using strips of plywood. The temperature is supposed to go up tomorrow, so I'm gonna have to wait to adhere these in place until then, but I can still figure out exactly where I'm gonna place them and also take care of a little bit of prep work. To get the supports perfectly lined up, I've got this little laser level that I actually purchased for the same project aboard Obelix. The forwardmost support will be located here, and I want around 50 centimeters between the supports because the slats are only 8 or 9 millimeters thick, so they're a little bendable. So if I put up 4 supports in this section here, that works out to be around 52 centimeters between them, which is perfect. To have all of the rows of screws be parallel, I line the laser up at 90 degrees to the hull. That'll make sure they're all vertical and nice and parallel. This is the last location I need to mark. If you're going to be doing this on your boat, I highly recommend you pick up a laser level. They're cheap and it makes life a lot easier. The very last thing I did yesterday was to do a quick test fit of the supports I'm going to be epoxying to the hull. This is what they look like and I'm happy with this, so let's go ahead and get some epoxy mixed up and get these adhered in place. While I was waiting for my little epoxy heating box to heat up the epoxy so that it's easier to work with, I decided to round over the sharp corners on these supports. Not for cosmetic reasons, but because it's a lot easier to seal a rounded over corner compared to a sharp corner. 8 pumps should be enough to get us started. A sprinkle of 406 and we should be good to go. To make absolutely sure that the supports are not going to go sliding around on me, I'm going to add a little dab of hot glue. That might seem like a weird thing to do, but it holds the support in place, makes sure that it matches the curvature of the hull, and it's a lot quicker than trying to wedge this thing up there with some kind of doohickey. That's the first support in place, only another 9 to go. that was a fairly smooth process. Everything is looking good, but I did kind of mess up down there. I was a little bit too generous with the thickened epoxy, and the hot glue didn't manage to get a good bond, so I had to MacGyver it a little bit and use that other plywood there to kind of pull the support tight against the hull. But I think it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna crank the heat and then we'll leave the epoxy to cure overnight. It is now a couple of days later and the thickened epoxy is rock hard. For anybody in doubt, as you can see, fiberglass bonds really well to hot glue, and so does wood. With the thickened epoxy basically cured, the supports are now ready for primer and paint to protect the wood from any moisture. Last night I put up 3 shelves in the long-term storage area. That means the last thing I have to do to the clothing locker until it's ready for primer and paint is to finish the front of the hanging section. And that is basically the clothing locker ready for primer and paint. Tomorrow I'm going to go over the joints with a little bit of polyester putty and also the rough ends of the plywood here, just to make sure everything is nice and smooth for paint. Now, if I wanted to get fancy, and I haven't really made up my mind yet, I could add a little strip of hardwood on each of these edges here, just to make it a little bit more hard wearing. There is something else I would like to take care of tonight, and that's just to grab some measurements and make a little template for the plywood I need for the washer dryer section. A long time ago I made these 2 mock-ups here. The bottom one is the washing machine and the top one is the dryer. I was gonna stack the 2 on top of each other, so the dryer on top of the washing machine, but then a friend of mine pointed out that if I just lowered the dryer just a little bit, then I could actually fit it behind the washing machine. So that leaves this area here open for, well, stuff. For instance, it might be nice to have a little basket here for emptying the dryer, or we could put the soap for the washing machine up here, or also just the fact that having this space here be open makes it a lot less claustrophobic coming through the door. So what do I need to do to get this area ready for primer and paint? Well, I need to build a shelf for the dryer, and I also want to cover up this somewhat ugly laminate. And there's also some kind of funkiness here to take into consideration with the door frame. Last night I swung by the workshop to pick up some plywood for the dryer shelf, and it turned out I had this perfect little piece of scrap. And that is the shelf for the dryer in place. Don't worry about the shelf here looking a little bit short. The mock-up includes a hump on the back of the dryer and also the door, which protrudes out a little bit. And there we have both the washer and the dryer in place. I think this is going to work out really well. I got the door frame cleaned up. It's a little bit of an odd shape because in the old layout, there's a piece of plywood that came out roughly at that angle. Like I mentioned, I want to cover up the texture of this old laminate and also the color. Also, I want to fill up that little gap between the door frame and the main bulkhead. I just haven't quite figured out how I want to do that yet. Let's take a little break from woodworking and move on to the electronics section of this video. A few months back I installed a bunch of stuff in the mast. There's all new navigational lights, a Garmin wind instrument, a Garmin GC200 camera at the very top of the mast, and a Garmin Fantom 18 radar. A few weeks back I installed a Garmin chart plotter here at the nav station. I haven't fired it up yet, but if I can fire it up today, then we can check if the radar and the camera and the wind instrument works. That would be kind of cool. I've already plowed through the installation instructions and the quick start manual, so let's go ahead and get the chart plotter hooked up. We'll start with the chart plotter and then we'll add the wind instrument, the camera, and the radar. This cable comes with the chart plotter, attaches to the back, and that is how you power the chart plotter. There's also some old NMEA standard connections here and a connection for a horn and some kind of accessory on connection. I'll be removing this little fuse here because I've got a better way of fusing the chart plotter. Better might be the wrong word, but it's definitely a little bit of a neater way of fusing it. I've got these super little neat fuse holders up here. I'll give you guys a closer look at them in just a second. See these little gray doohickeys up here? Well, they open up and inside of them you can put a little glass fuse right in there. And then we just close him back up. That means all of these tiny little fuses for electronics are going to be in one place. While we're on the topic of wiring, in next week's video, or maybe the week after that, we're going to take a look at digital switching. I'm going to combine the kind of traditional way of doing wiring with a spiffy new way of digital switching. And I think it's going to be really cool, and it's going to open up a lot of possibilities. But yeah, we'll get back to that in a week or two. The chart plotter is now connected up to the terminal bar here, and then down to the bus bar on the distribution panel. Here at the back of the chart plotter, there is one more port that we're going to need, and it's this one for an RJ45 connection. But yeah, let's save that for a little bit later in the video. So let's get this closed up, and let's turn on this guy. Oh, recommended track route, auto guidance, lines, blah, 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 blah. Yes. This feels like a really nice chart plotter. The interface is super responsive. Of course, I've only just powered it up, so I don't know how to use all of the clever features yet. But I think the first thing I want to do is to get the chart plotter hooked up to what Garmin calls Active Captain. I've already inserted the SD card, so let's go to this One Helm tab and Active Captain. Select Wi-Fi and turn on Wi-Fi. Okay, I have input a super secret, super long password, and it's now providing a Wi-Fi network that I think we need to join from my phone. I joined the Wi-Fi network on my phone, opened up the Active Captain app. Now the chart plotter is asking me if this user is the owner of the vessel. I believe if you answer yes to this, you cannot change it later, so make sure you make the right choice. But I am the owner, so yes. I will select the SD card I inserted and format it. I've got the chart plotter and my phone connected, and now the Active Captain app is telling me that there are firmware updates for the GMI20 displays and also for the chart plotter. This is going to take a few minutes, but so far from a tech junkie standpoint, this is a 10 out of 10 experience. I'm waiting for the software updates to be validated. So far, this has been a very smooth process. I am very impressed, actually. While that software update is doing its thing, why don't we go ahead and get the radar and the camera connected. And for that, we will need this big box. This is the GMS10 Network Port Expander. The radar, the camera, the chart plotter here at the nav station, and the chart plotter we're going to have out in the cockpit are all going to connect to this box. If you recall, when I installed the radar, I had to chop off the end of the Ethernet cable to get it through the bottom of the mast. And I'll include links for the videos where I installed the radar and the camera down in the description. But yeah, I had to chop off this end here. I was a little bit bummed about that because this is a really nice waterproof connection, but it turns out Garmin actually sells these plugs that you can simply just fit yourself. It is just a regular RJ45 connection, so all you need is one of these doohickeys here and you're good to go. And these come in sets of 2. I've already used one because I've already put it on the cable. I've hooked up power to the GMS10 box and connected the chart plotter. Now let's connect the radar and see if we get some flashing green LEDs. This is certainly a good sign. Let's head to the chart plotter and see if we've got radar. Yep, we do. There is a radar tab down here, and there's also a little radar icon up there. That wasn't there before. Let's see. Oh, spinning up. I hear the radar. And look at that. This is awesome. Of course, there's a ton of clutter here inside of the marina, so it's kind of hard to tell what we're looking at. But there are some shapes down here, and I'm pretty sure I know what that is. I believe that's the boats over there, but yeah, once there's less clutter around us, it'll be more interesting to play with the radar. So the radar works. That's awesome. I've also connected up this little black box here. This is the GND10. This cable goes to the wind instrument, and this cable goes to the NMEA 2000 network. And if you look here at the GMI20 display, we've now got wind data. It's really not blowing that hard today, but you might be able to see some of the numbers changing, so it is working. And if you look at the chart plotter over here, we've also got wind data there now. Pretty dang awesome. The radar works, the wind instrument works. Now let's try for the camera at the top of the mast. But there is a chance it's not gonna work. And that's because of this cable. The cable that came with the camera was too short, so I ordered this one, but unfortunately it was out of stock. So to be able to step the mast and get Athena splashed, I kind of have to splice my own cable, which is not ideal. So not only is there a dodgy splice here inside of the boat, there's also one at the very top of the mast. So yeah, I'm not sure this is gonna work, but let's give it a go. Yeah, nope, this is not working. I am 99.999% sure it's not working because I messed up one of those splices. So this is my fault. I am disappointed that I'm not going to get to see the view from the top of the mast. I'd really been looking forward to that. But I do have a second GC200 camera that I'm planning on installing on the pulpit that we can try and hook up to see how it works. Yep, see, that's looking a lot better. Now let's try going to video and menu, source, GC200. If you're thinking that image looked a little bit fuzzy, there is a good explanation. There's a little protective sticker on here. The image quality is perfectly fine. Now let's try turning off the lights. Let's see if I can trick the camera into turning on its night mode. As you can see, the camera does have a night mode with infrared illumination. I'm kind of curious to see what the range is like, but yeah, we should test that tonight when it's dark outside. The GMS10 and the GND10 are both going to get mounted inside of the clothing locker, but of course I haven't finished painting in there yet, so that's why I've just kind of cobbled everything together here on the kitchen island. I'm going to go do a little bit of video editing, and then we can come back and see what the range is like on this little guy a little bit later tonight when it is dark. Great news, guys! I've been fiddling around with the cable for the GC20 up at the top of the mast, and it turns out the bad splice was the one here inside of the boat, not the one at the top of the mast. And that means I've now got a bird's eye view of almost all of the marina. In a fortunate mistake, I messed up the alignment of the camera so that it's 90 degrees off. That means vertically, we've got a really wide field of view. We can actually see 2/3 of the hull plus the horizon. I think it's really cool. I grabbed some video from the camera, and bear in mind it is pitch black outside right now. And this is me walking up on deck, shining a light around. I think this is going to be a very useful doohickey. I know the video is tiny because it's in portrait mode, but I do have the option of stretching it in software. So we can go like that. Of course, that does stretch it out, so it looks kind of weird, but the image gets a lot bigger. I think having the camera at the top of the mast is going to be a very useful tool. We can see a bunch of the running rigging, we can see the headstay, we can see, well, a lot of the boat in general, and we can also see out in front of us by quite a distance in case we're entering somewhere narrow. So yeah, I'm excited to see how we're going to use the camera at the top of the mast. I can also report that all of the lights I've added to the mast works. So yeah, everything in the mast works. I am so happy that I got the camera at the top of the mast working. That is a great ending to this week. Now, next week, my parents are going to swing by and help me with some of the sanding in the forward cabin. And I'm going to turn 40, so that's also kind of a milestone. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm just going to continue working in the forward cabin. We might take a look at that digital switching I mentioned earlier, but yeah, we'll see what happens next week. And that is going to be the end of this week's video. I hope to see all of you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below. And don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!